Hello and welcome along to the RTÉ Rugby podcast, our second rugby podcast here of the week on RTÉ. If you missed it, I spoke to Ronan O'Gara yesterday, looking ahead to France against Ireland on Friday night in the Guinness Six Nations. That's available to watch or listen in all the usual places. Today, though, we have the Ireland team news, and I have Bernard Jackman and Johnny Holland with me here because we're going to look ahead to Friday's opener against France in Marseille, and a couple of big calls from head coach Andy Farrell. Garry Ringrose is going to miss the game. He's out with a shoulder injury. Robbie Henshaw starts in his place alongside Bundyaki in the centre. Calvin Nash gets the nod over Jordan Larmour on the right wing. Jack Crowley is, as expected, at out half. And in the second row, Joe McCarthy is picked over James Ryan. He drops to the bench. A 6-2 split as well on that bench. In full, so Ireland. Forwards, Andrew Porter, Dan Sheehan, Tyke Furlong, Joe McCarthy, Tyke Byrne, Peter O'Mahony, Josh van der Fleer, and Caelan Doris complete the pack. And then in the back line, Gibson Park and Jack Crowley. In the centre, Bundyaki and Robbie Henshaw, Calvin Nash and James Lowe on the wings, with Hugo Keenan at full back. The replacements then, Ronan Kelleher, Cian Healy, Tyke Furlong, James Ryan, Ryan Baird, Jack Conan are the six forwards, and then Conor Murray and Kieran Frawley making up the two backline replacements. Guys, thanks a million for joining us. We'll go through the big selections piece by piece and break it down like that as we go. But overall, Birch, I'll come to yourself first. Just initial thoughts on what Andy Farrell has done, both with the people in the starting team and that 6-2 split on the bench.
Yeah, I think 6-2 split makes sense when you look at that French squad. That's certainly the area that we're going to go under the most pressure, and obviously France have gone 6-2 as well. I think I wasn't aware that Ringrose had such a significant injury until the last couple of days, so I was probably expecting him to play at 13. But we don't lose anything with Robbie Henshaw and Bundyaki. There's very little between the three of them. I think Calvin Nash deserves his opportunity. I think he's been really good for Munster. I think Munster play a similar type of attacking game to Ireland, where he has a license to roam, and I think he's well suited to that. And he gets his first Six Nations start, and it's a great opportunity for him. And then Joe McCarthy, I felt he was the form lock, but you never know if they'll be brave enough to play him in a game of this magnitude. But I think that's the right call. The only other debate was I felt maybe we'd go with James Ryan alongside him, and then Tyke Byrne at 6 and Peter O'Mahony at 7, just because of this set piece issue that started to creak a little bit during the World Cup, and obviously their strength there, and horses for courses type selection. But he's gone with Tyke Byrne alongside Joe McCarthy and his first choice back row, and what's been his first choice back row probably for the last year is O'Mahony, Doris and van der Fleer. And then maybe he's looking back at that French game in the Viva last year, where we played a really high tempo game, and having a traditional open side like van der Fleer is more important. But yeah, it's probably as expected. I think Jack Crowley was always going to be the 10. And then it's probably only on the bench, really. It's Conor Murray getting the nod ahead of Craig Casey. I think is maybe a little bit surprising. Certainly it's not a form choice, but yeah, that's it's probably as expected, really.
Early thoughts, Johnny?
I think Birch summed it up very well. I think McCarthy, I think everyone's looking for him to get a start. It was just we don't have to drop someone, so it was easy for everyone to say start him. I did not expect James Ryan to be the one dropped. I think when you're looking at it in the combination of 4 to 8, you had a choice between James Ryan and van der Fleer. I actually think both of them were playing really well. I mean, I think James Ryan will be going and knocking on the door asking questions, because I think he's been doing a good second row's job, and van der Fleer, I think it's very easy for people to say, he hasn't really reached the heights of his World Player of the Year accolade, but when you see people sharing stats and ruck arrivals and blast through the ruck, it might not be a poach, but it's a disruption, then it's a very hard back five to pick from, and that's something that Andy Farrell obviously has the privilege of doing, and it's a massive challenge. But I think it was always going to be between James Ryan and van der Fleer, and the others are going to slot in somewhere. I think the easy thing would be to hold Joe McCarthy back and not play him, because you can you can still hold him back. I think that wasn't the right choice. So he's been. I think just the enthusiasm that he's playing with. I think like he's still making one or two mistakes. You're expecting that when he plays on the edge so much. Like he has, you see there was stats across all the second rows, and he probably just had but he did have a small bit more in terms of penalties conceded. But I think he's much better in that sense. I think he's conceding less penalties than he did before the World Cup camp, we'll say. And I thought he tightened it up and matured very well across that campaign. So I think he had to go in there. I think he did. But I'm like Birch. I thought Pete might have gone to 7. And I think Caelan Doris nearly gets you away with that because he's so good around the breakdown. Maybe he doesn't cover the ground in the way that Van der Fleer might or a traditional open side does. But I think with Doris in around the breakdown, he might have gotten away with that as well. So look, it's interesting. I think like Calvin Nash is 26, and you feel like he's a young fella coming in for his first Six Nations start. I remember Calvin coming into the academy or in around it when I was coming through the academy and senior contract, and he was a hot shot out of school, and he was going to just cruise through this whole system. And I think that's the reality of it. He reminds me of Andrew Conway quite a bit, in that there's kind of a couple of waves of Calvin Nash, and I think this is the strongest one, and he's more than deserving of his opportunity. But I think even the way he plays the game is very like Conway. Very good in the air, very dependable, very nice tight lines, good short steps and good footwork. So like he gets out of contact, but he gets through it as well because he's so strong and compact. So there's I'm looking forward to seeing him, and I think it's not before his time, but obviously like a lot of people, he's had to wait for an injury to get into that squad. But it'll be very hard to see him coming out of it if he has a good game, because he's someone that could rack up a lot of Irish caps all of a sudden because he's after getting his opportunity and all. But yeah, like Bert said, I think the rest of it is as expected. The combinations of 4 to 8 was very interesting. The rest of it is, less surprising, really.
Mm-hmm. I'll double back onto Calvin Nash in a little while, but to go back onto Joe McCarthy, and as we said, like the fact that he's coming in for James Ryan, Birch, I think we were talking about it on the podcast over the last couple of weeks, and I think we'd all kind of settled on what we might have preferred would have been what we were saying earlier on, maybe Josh on the bench and Peter O'Mahony going to 7 and Tyke Byrne slipping into the back row. But to pick him for a Six Nations debut, but also to pick him for a Six Nations debut ahead of James Ryan, that's a pretty big vote of confidence from Andy Farrell, isn't it?
Yeah, it's massive. And look, since Joe McCarthy came out of school, where he was a bit of a late developer, like the talk about him has always been, wait till you see this kid, in Trinity, Big Joe when he was only 18, 19, and any coach or players who were involved with him were excited by him. And even, let's be honest, he got brought into the Irish squad last year without having really been a first choice for Leinster. But since that World Cup, he's just come back and he's been on fire, and he moves incredibly well. He has a kind of enthusiasm for the game that's nearly infectious. You nearly see it live or on a TV screen. He just really seems to be enjoying himself, and then he has the physical capacity to do or have big impacts. And it's really interesting how James Ryan reacts to this. Like what we've seen in the past with him is he's incredibly determined. I mean, let's be honest, a month ago, if you were talking about the Irish captaincy, James Ryan was right there in the discussion, and probably will be again. But Joe McCarthy's there on form, and now it's up to James Ryan, Ian Henderson to displace him or displace Tyke Byrne. But that's healthy, and I think that's where we need to get to. And let's be honest, we don't have that at 10. We don't really have that at 9 in terms of like someone really putting the gun to Gibson Park's head. With injuries, we don't have it on the wing. We've no one really pushing Hugo Keenan. We don't have an obvious stand-in for Porter. So yeah, that's the downside of this squad. And the challenge for Farrell over the next couple of seasons is to find more Joe McCarthy's, to find more Jack Crowley's, who can come in and start, and everybody's excited about what they can do.
And Johnny, like I'd say, it's not so much even like finding the quality of player, but finding someone with, I think, like the attitude that Joe McCarthy has shown, where he's come in and he's like, he hasn't just been patient and waiting for the opportunity. He's come in and taken the jersey. in the last 12 months. It hasn't been a case of he's just slowly gone into camp and done the right things and waited for the right opportunity to get a start here or there or get some minutes. Like, this is a case of someone coming in and putting the foot down and taking his place in the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the part that we're not going to understand really from the inside or looking in from the outside is that they have certain roles as well to play in certain systems, and you never know what's really going on, day to day and what their markers are and where they're going to get picked. But I think what Bert said there in terms of like, the enthusiasm, the kind of infectiousness around his game, and like the way he just catches your eye so much, like, doesn't he? So watching it from the outside, he catches your eye, and then you obviously have to drill into like what's he really doing, how many ruck arrivals, how many contacts, how many dominant hits, etc., etc. What's he doing? What he's doing in the lineout. But I think he's very similar, even though he's there nearly as long and longer than Jack. But Jack was the same when we were asking him to start at 10. It was like he doesn't know any better than to be, this enthusiastic, this confident. If you can pick the same old soldiers that have a little bit of baggage coming with them. And I think the best part of Joe McCarthy is he's not really carrying that baggage. He's lost with Leinster and he's been knocked out of the World Cup with Ireland, but he wasn't as front line. Now he's kind of just bringing himself to the fore without as much of that baggage. I'm not saying that James Ryan is showing the signs of that or anyone else is, but like there's that kind of fearlessness of youth as well, I suppose. And I think Ryan Baird is bringing the same thing. In his defensive line out, the way he runs around the pitch. Bernard said about how well Joe McCarthy moves. Ryan Baird's a freak, and I think unfortunately he's been gazumped by Joe McCarthy's enthusiasm, because you can't really put all of those into the same team. You're going to be young and maybe less experienced, so you do need the Peter O'Mahony's of the world to balance that out. You'd love to see a situation where Ryan Baird had to play as well, because imagine two of those guys on the pitch, you get some galloping runs, I think. But unfortunately for him, Joe McCarthy is the one that really settles in there very easily. So yeah, like that, I think the way Jack came into the team with that like lack of fear because he doesn't know any better, I think Joe McCarthy's in the same position and doing loads of really good things as well. Like the way he gets back into the breakdown and disrupts everything after a tackle, his second efforts and all that kind of stuff, which is what they all look for. He's been class. I'm looking forward to seeing him put his marker down now, because James Ryan is, tried and tested and breathing down his neck, and he won't be taking that one easily,
Birch, if we're looking at the game itself on Friday, I would imagine one of the big things we want to see from Ireland in compared to the World Cup is, has that lineout been fixed? How confident are you of that?
Not overly, to be honest. I think you'd want to see not just Friday night, but you'd want to see, 3 out of 4 games or 4 out of 5 games where we've kind of been consistent there. And also, I think just some of our lineout issues at provincial level is also maybe made me being a little bit overly negative. I also don't think we've picked the best lineout pack, and that's part of the reason why I would have been combining Tyburn and James Ryan alongside McCarthy and having a Mahoney in there and Doris. So I just think we look at that French back 5, 4 out of the 5 of them are good lineout operators, and Willems is very good at this disrupting and destroying opposition maul. So he knows his role within that. So yeah, it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge, and we need to have, like, if you lose a couple over a short period of time away in France, historically that just gives them massive momentum and massive energy, and it could be a long night. So I really hope it settled down. I think obviously we've had 2 weeks now together. Paul would have been going around the country, having one-on-ones with players and talking about the little changes they want to make, etc. So the brain power is there. You just like to see it just be executed, as I said, during this tournament, and just build up that confidence again. Because at the moment, if you're playing Ireland, you're saying, let's get after them in the air, let's get bodies up, let's squeeze the gap, let's pressure them, let's make the throw to areas that they don't want to throw to, and compete there. So that's the challenge. And as I said, this French team on paper, and based on previous form, look like they've got 4 quality lineout operators in it, and it'll be a proper test.
When you would have looked back over the World Cup, the lineout issues in it, like, are there clear patterns of what's going wrong? Like, is it a throwing issue? Is Is it that there's too much movement before the jump? Is there too little movement in the jump where they're not?
Yeah, I look at that. This is why it's actually worrying.
Is there a
Neil,
pattern
because,
there?
yeah, the pattern was like pretty much all the key fundamentals at times seem to crack, and that's what would be hard to fix, because it just seemed to lose that whole cohesion, calmness, speed of movement, speed of throw in general was good actually. Calling into areas where it was obviously risky, and what happened against South Africa, happening against New Zealand. So yeah, it's just it was lots of different things. But again, like mid-World Cup, it can be hard to fix that with so many other things going on. But I'm sure Paul O'Connell and Andy Farr, when they reviewed the World Cup, they would have said, look, we need to put more time into this to get it back to where it was. And I've no doubt that we can do it. And obviously Pete is a very good line operator, and he'll back himself to win ball to the front, and he'll be good on defensive ball. But big challenge for Tyke Byrne, and Doris even, who may become a primary line option for us to execute that this weekend.
Johnny, looking out towards the back line then, to come back around to Garry Ringrose being out and Robbie Henshaw coming in to partner Bundee Aki in the centre, do you think, does that change anything from an Irish point of view in terms of how they'll attack the game or how they'll look to attack? Like, you've got four very, very, very powerful centres there in Aki, Henshaw, Dante and Gail Fiku. The velodrome will be shaking anytime one of the two of those four players come together.
Yeah, Dante and Aki in the middle of the pitch is a fright. Like, it's let them play their own game. Let the rest of us get away from it and let their contacts just stay between the two of them. But I think like Dante is very good in the breakdown. He's very physical in the middle of the pitch. And I think, you know, if you look at Ireland's attack, what they've been good at in the past, maybe after their initial stint, was they've been on the front foot in attack in terms of changing their strategy and challenging other teams. And just when teams think that they're used to them, they'll change something and they'll change the whole picture altogether. So I think, like, I'm expecting that Ireland won't play a massively different attacking system or structure, but there has to be change there, because, you know, that's without Sexton in particular. Like, I know, like I champion Jack Crowley all the time, but like at the same time, he's not Johnny Sexton, at least not yet. And you know, there's going to be a different cohesion there. He's had a lot of time with the team and all the rest of it, but something in there is going to have to change as well. Because otherwise we're playing the same game as the World Cup and things move on, you know. So teams will be used to previewing Ireland from the World Cup. So I expect some bit of change there and some bit of I'm hoping that when we watch the game we're going, oh, that's new, lovely to strike down the short side or whatever it is, like, you know. And we've seen that from them before when they used to do the pod off the 9, and all of a sudden they're sweeping around the other side and they're going down the short side. So very nice trickery like that in their attack. But then the other thing where I think we can get and there was talk of Garry Ringrose going onto the wing, and then he played three centres, and Garry Ringrose has been a very good winger. But I think for Ireland's development, it's better that he's not playing now. If you're going to go with Henshaw or Ringrose, go with one or the other and leave Nash on the wing, because I think that's going to be better for developing our wing spots in our back three. But if you look at Calvin Nash in the air and Mo Fana not being a winger, they're the ones playing with three centres. Well, he's played on the wing. I understand. I don't have much experience of watching him on the wing, but I understand that he has with club and country to a small degree. But if Nash can get into the air and get ball back off him, that's something Ireland might target as well. But it's, geez, they're two very good backlines. Like, Maxime Lucu is just in the shadow of Antoine Dupont. Like, he's an unbelievable player. I spoke to Billy Scannell quite a bit. Billy was in Biarritz while Lucu was there, and he said that he's a freak. Like, kicks off both legs and he just gets no attention because they're dealing with one of the best rugby players in the world, if not, you know, a generation, like, you know, so in Antoine Dupont. So their halfbacks are class, their midfield is rock solid. Peno is a freak. Ramos does a lot of good things in games. He can be a bit wild and unstructured, but in France it's going to work out for him. So maybe Mo Fana is a bit of an area that they'll see if they're weak in the backline. Can we go on to him at some stage? But it's going to be a difficult one, especially if they don't break down that midfield.
Yeah, and Birch, Mo Fana over Louis Bielbarré was the selection that kind of jumped out. Everyone was instantly their eyes going towards Lucu because that's the gap that Antoine Dupont has left. But Mo Fana on the wing, what does that kind of what does that indicate, or what do you think it's
Yeah, look, I think it's a reflection on Bia Barry's problems under the high ball against the Springboks in the quarter final. Led to 2 tries and a couple of key turnovers. He just didn't dominate the air. I don't think Mofana is a brilliant aerial winger as well, and he's been playing pretty much all of his rugby at 12 for Bordeaux, where he's been part of a brilliant backline with obviously Penaud and Lucu and Jalibert, who are all playing for Bordeaux and now playing for France this weekend. So there's a bit of continuity in that for them from the same backline. But yeah, I think it's probably a bonus for Ireland because I don't think he obviously doesn't have anywhere near as much pace, and I think pure pace is something that Ireland potentially could struggle with. Now, obviously, on the other wing, Penaud is ridiculous, but I just think it's a conservative decision. Galthié had the bravery to launch Bia Barry in, inexperienced in the greatest show and the pressure, and in general he did quite well. Look, it's a very good South African kicking game, we know, and yeah, he had his difficulties, but I think he's been pretty good for Bordeaux in the air and on the ground, and I think that's a bonus for Ireland that he's out. But yeah, when I saw that French team, to be honest, I look at obviously Miafu's injured, so Willemse gets called back. But the strength and depth, having Dante fit, the form that Penaud's in, I think Jalibert and Lucu as a combination are extremely dangerous, and they ripped apart Connacht, in round 1 of the European Cup, and the back row, Aldrit has come back from his little bit of a break. He's been outstanding. Olivier Croix, Antonio basically changed his mind about retiring. Mo Vaca has gone from being a replacement, coming on to give impact, to being a 60-minute player. Now they have Marchand back, which obviously was a blow from during the World Cup. And then Nolan Lagarak. I mean, Lucu is class, but when that game breaks up and people get tired, and Nolan Lagarak, the Racing 92-9, is incredibly dangerous. So yeah, Boudinot as well from La Rochelle is a very good 6. So yeah, on paper, I think France look very, very strong. And if we're to win this away from home in Marseille, I think it'd be an unbelievable result for us. And that's not saying Ireland are a very good side, but I just think given we're starting a new cycle, to get off to a start with a win over this French team, I think it'd be a huge result for Randy Farr.
Yeah, in short, they're no mugs, essentially, France. I'll come back around, Johnny, to Calvin Nash, who you spoke about a little bit earlier on, and kind of seeing him when he was just kind of first coming through with Munster. And that was something I wanted to talk about as well, because it was last night when I was looking through a few bits, it was you could easily forget that Calvin Nash and Jordan Larmour started on the left and right wings for the same Ireland under-20 team. They're both 26 years old. Jordan Larmour, I think, is 2 months older than Nash. And Jordan Larmour has won 30 caps, and all of those coming up until 2 years ago. So, and then you've Calvin Nash, who's come in the last 6-7 months, well, the last 12 months, I suppose, since he got his call up. But it just kind of goes to show the 2 very different paths players can follow, and how development doesn't just follow the same path. One player can develop at a very different rate to another, even when they're both prodigious talents coming through at the age of 18 or 19 years of age into academies.
Yeah, it is. And I think for someone like Calvin, he's a confident lad. I'm sure when he was coming out of school, he would have thought that he'd have Jordan Larmour's trajectory, and he probably was on track for that. I don't know what happened in between, but Jordan Larmour he's been in and out, and he's never really cemented it. And you'd see his footwork is incredible, and he's very hard to stop. And then you look at is he going forward, or he's beating 8 tacklers? Where is he going? And that's I love watching him. I think he's class to watch him beating defenders and stuff. But beating defenders isn't actually the outcome. It's going forward towards the try line, isn't it? And I think what Calvin Nash does very well, Earlsey used to it. Conway did it when they beat a man, they're forward and they're through the next kind of line, and that's what Calvin Nash is doing. And maybe there's small bits and pieces within that. I think Jordan Larmour kind of blotted his copybook once or twice in the air as well defensively when he went into 15. He's loads of opportunities, but I think it's harsh on him. He's playing really good rugby, you know. So I've been kind of I've been quite harsh on him there because he's actually playing a lot of good rugby with Leinster. But I do think Calvin Nash is the form choice. I think he's been really good. His fundamentals are class, and he's fully worth his start. But like you said, the development is different. Like, you know, he's had to wait a long time, even in a good trajectory in the last 12 months. You know, he was probably feeling hard done by being left out of the World Cup squad, you know. So I do wonder if this was like at a different stage in this. You know, I actually don't like talking about the World Cup cycle anymore because I've learned that it's not a 4-year thing anymore, is it? It must be broken up or it's too long and things change. But, you know, if this was year 4 of it and you had a Jordan Larmour and Calvin Nash, would Andy Farrell be going with fellas who've been around the squad a lot more? And would Larmour get in? I'm not sure because he obviously backed Calvin Nash to get into the squad last year as well. But I like the fact that we've had to change a few things. Maybe it's because of injury, but I like the fact that it has to change because by the time, you know, 2025 and 2027 come around, you know, Mac Hansen will still be there and someone else will still be there. So now we'll have Calvin Nash with hopefully 10 plus more caps under his belt as well at that stage, you know. So we got more options. But yeah, the development is funny because you see that at underage as well. They develop at different stages. Just because a fella doesn't play under 18 schools or under 20s doesn't mean he's not going to get into the international side later on in his career, and he developed through the club as well. And I do think there's probably people, you know, even at Loosehead and different positions that are just back at their club developing now. Like they probably still would be in the thought process, but they're better off just developing a bit more in their club, and the development curve will be different for them as well. So like I don't expect it to be the same thing in 2025 or so. But Calvin Nash is a very exciting one. I can't wait to see how he gets on, and I hope he does break the door down now and put himself firmly in that position.
Yeah, and Birch, like he'd to be very, very patient at Munster, where when he came in initially, like you look at the players who were ahead of him, Keith Earls, Andrew Conway, Simon Zebo would have been there initially when he came through. Then Mike Haley arrives in. Like there was a lot of heavyweight wing talent ahead of him.
Yeah, there was, and probably I'm sure he had doubts. I'm sure he thought about maybe moving on somewhere else to get more game time, but he stuck to it, and also I think he probably coincided with Munster changing how they play, and I agree he's brilliant at chasing kicks, etc., and that's one of the reasons why he's probably got the nod. But I think the other parts of his game, his work rate off the ball, his footwork, etc., and it's very similar to how Ireland play. And he's probably not. Look, he's not a Damien Penaud in terms of try scoring ability, but very few wingers are. But the way Ireland play should suit him, and I think that's a real opportunity for him. And he's going to go from a system that's quite similar in Munster to Ireland. And yeah, look at we need more depth, and we need fellas to come a little bit left field. And he's come a little bit slower through to the top, but now he's there and he's on form. He must have massive confidence as well the way things have been going for him. So it'd be great to see him have a really good debut and build on it.
Even that, Johnny's out the back of the pod of 3. He turns the corner, he's very comfortable on the ball. Not as like elusive as Mac Hansen maybe, but they're both as comfortable in possession. You know, so he's doing that a lot with Munster, isn't he? Where he's getting on the ball. If Jack or the 10s aren't around, he's there and he's stepping up to first receiver. He's getting in behind that pod a lot. And when he gets there, like his positioning is really nice. He's so tucked and he just appears at the last minute. So he's obviously been doing a lot of work at that, but he's a clever player. You know, I think if he's got work-ons and he's getting on the ball and he's running these lines, that's why he reminds me of Conway, or like, you know, Doug Howlett was the teacher in Munster for a long time in terms of how to hide for so long. But those wingers seem to be getting really good at it, and he's definitely someone that will get himself into dangerous positions if he's given the freedom within the Irish system, like Burgess said, you know, to get into the Mac Hansen role and just go roaming.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see him on Friday night. Let's talk Jack Crowley then, because it's his 10th cap. It almost feels like a second debut because we're obviously into this post Johnny Sexton era. Birch, given the size of the occasion and, you know, you're starting a new World Cup cycle, it's probably hard to expect a perfect performance out of him this weekend. But what do you want to see from him, even if it isn't 10 out of 10 lights out? What are the pillars you want to see?
Basically just what he does all the time. He seems to take responsibility. He seems calm. good variety in his game. I'm not overly worried about him. And look at, he'll function if we get good ball. Jack Crowley will make good use of it. And if we're under the pump, I wouldn't expect him to be right or over. He's the best 10 in Ireland at the moment on form. And obviously his age profile is phenomenal. And I think he's going to be thereabouts for a long time. So just do what he does most weeks for Munster, and then for the Irish under-20s before that, and Cork on. He's always been a very accomplished player and seems to have the mentality to match. So yeah, I just think now's his chance. And it was funny, I only heard the other day that when he got his first start for Ireland, he actually ended up having to wear Sexton's jersey. I didn't know that, and now obviously he looks like he's in prime position to replace him. So there's a nice link there. But no, it's about him. And look, he's not going to be Johnny Sexton. He's not going to be Ronan O'Gara. He's not going to be Eric Elwood. He'll be himself, and he'll do it his own way. And that's why I'm certainly excited to watch him, and not have too much expectation. But I think he can become an incredibly important player for Ireland.
And Johnny, I think you kind of hinted at it earlier on as well. How important is it that he doesn't try go out and be a Johnny Sexton tribute band?
Yeah, I think Jack has matured quite a bit as well, even though he's young, so he didn't need to mature before his time. But he's not going to go and try and win the game on his own now. I think the most important part is that he just plays people around the pitch, and he has his moments with Munster. He'll have a chip, and he'll have a bit of a break or whatever he does. He'll definitely have his moments, but he needs to control the kicking game, especially with France. You see the Sean Edwards clip during the week. They're going to kick the ball and they're going to kick it out of their half. So I think he just needs to make sure he doesn't get bored within that and just put his team with their own strategies into the right areas of the pitch and just allow fellas to flow around the pitch. Because it's going to be a hard enough battle at the gain line and a hard enough battle at set piece that he just needs to make sure that they creep over the gain line as many times as possible. But it's interesting, I only thought of it there as we're speaking. He nearly went to La Rochelle, and now he's a front runner, for a fella to back himself like that. Because I think there was a lot of thought out there that you're behind a lot here. Take the opportunity to work under Raj in a different country and decent contract and all that. There was people talking about that, and all of a sudden Jack was like, "No, I'm not going anywhere. I'll gazump Ben Healy and I'll get into this and I'll get into that." And all of a sudden he's a front runner with not much challenge. But at the same time, when you Frawley hasn't been backed by Leinster, but I think he is backed within this Irish system. We saw that before he got a couple of injuries, that he was backed within that system. So if Jack can manage him around the pitch and all that, I think he will be the front runner. I don't think there'll be much of a challenge. But if he starts to creak, Frawley will come in and he'll control that game. So you kind of touched on it there. It's like a second debut. You see that a lot with players. That's like second season syndrome. For him, it's not a second season, but it kind of is with Ireland. He had the Australia game in November. He had a good run at it before the World Cup. But this is like a new wave of him now, and he needs to not maybe be on the same graph as what he was on, because you can't stay on that graph. Maybe one or two people can, but realistically, he's not going to stay on that graph. But he needs to keep trending upwards, or there will be a challenger all of a sudden. And as he knows more than anyone else, the landscape can change for the better or the worse. So he needs to just control things, keep him on the front foot, win the kicking game, or at least compete in that with France. And he's going to, I've no doubt that he'll be calm under pressure in there as well. He's got a weird confidence in times where you doubt yourself, that he just flows through it. Like Bert said, he played with Cork on, stepped up to that level, didn't really have any fear, which you wouldn't expect him to. Stepped up at Munster. He's just a player that finds the same level as what he's playing at. He could be a lion and he'll just play. He'll just keep going with that.
You kind of have to have that for an out half as well, don't you? Just that complete self-confidence. Yeah,
you do. There's enough of us that played in that position that question ourselves morning, noon, and night. But fellas like Jack would kind of teach you a lesson that you don't have much time to be going around questioning yourself, because a whole lot of the rest of the team are relying on you putting them into the right position. So he's unreal. He's not cocky or by any means. He probably wouldn't even call himself confident. Sometimes that exudes out of the person and they don't even realize it. But I think that's the case with him, because he's very down to earth, works extraordinarily hard. But people feel confidence from him, which is the most important thing in his position, that the players around him think that he's confident, at least because they'll go with him.
And Birch, would it fill you with a bit of confidence or assuredness knowing that he's got pretty good experience around him in that backline there, where Jameson Gibson-Park is starting inside him, and he's got Bundyaki and Robbie Henshaw outside his shoulder.
No, I think it's ideal, and obviously he picked up a lot of time with those lads in November, the Six Nations last year, World Cup camp, and he has to feel very comfortable now around that Irish setup and in his right to be there. And yeah, look at the back row's experience. It's a very experienced Irish team, and you know, he's also, when you compare him to some of the lads who play Test rugby for France, he's very experienced, and we're a little slower to put them in there, and there could be long-term value in that, or it could be something that's holding us back. But I don't think he'll be overly worried about having a right to be on that field, and that's exactly what the way he should feel, because he has proven himself to be of that quality.
Right, we're getting down into the very, very final minutes here before predictions. Couple of other games, we'll touch on them very, very quickly. Saturday, we've got Wales against Scotland. Birch, when you look around at the Six Nations this year and the amount of change there is in various teams, whether it's coaching or captains or out halves being gone, Scotland probably have the most continuity out of everyone. If they've got England and France at home this year, if the stars are ever aligning for Scotland to actually go and do something, should this be the year for them to do it? I'm not saying will they, but
Yeah.
Are the pieces falling into place for them to, if they have it within themselves, to take advantage?
Yeah, obviously it's one of their better chances, but I certainly wouldn't be backing them to do anything massive. But I think the biggest point is it's pretty much now or never, or certainly over the next 2 or 3 years, because age grade rugby in Scotland is an absolute disaster. And obviously the project player rule, you know, if you look at the number of project players coming in, it was 6-7 years ago where, you know, they really went aggressively and targeted that, and then it was a 3-year qualification period. There's not as many project players coming into Scotland, and as I said, their under 20s, under 18s are just way off the level. So you'd be worried about Scottish rugby, and this generation, and this year and next year, maybe the year after, squad at a push, they'll have to do something, or it looks like there's dark years ahead of them.
Yeah, I think now or never is the good way to sum it up, as you said. And then quickly, then England, I'm struggling to get a read on them. Did they overachieve at the World Cup? Are they going to be much better, you know, with the addition of time to actually prepare, that Steve Borthwick didn't have last year, Felix Jones coming in as well, and then that's also offset by the fact that there's no Owen Farrell, and you know, they've lost a couple of high profile players to international retirements. What are your general thoughts on England coming into this? Because I'm struggling to get a read on them. I'm interested to see how they do.
Yeah, obviously they had decided a draw that we've all been complaining about for a long time, but they worked their way through the World Cup, and we're building an identity with that, and they were comfortable with what that was. But I think Steve Borthwick has had more time. They're after starting their rebuild, if you want to put it that way, in a World Cup year. So before everyone else, I think they're probably further down the track. They should be a much more competitive Six Nations side. I actually do have fears over them being very good. Because I don't want them to be as good. I want Ireland obviously to be better than them. But I do think they'll be, you know, if you look at who's going to win it, Ireland and France were runaway last year. You didn't think anyone was going to touch them. It was the first game of the Six Nations in the last 2 years. France beat Ireland and won it. Ireland beat France and won it. I think England will start to close that gap a small bit more, especially with the continuity of Steve Borthwick. Yeah, they've missed a couple of players in and out, and Marcus Smith isn't any greater news for them, but I do think they're going to start well, and I think they'll challenge for it.
How close do you think, Birch, England will be to Ireland and France? They do have a nice schedule, where they can build themselves in. It's Ireland and France are their final 2 games. I think it's Italy and Wales are their first 2. So like there is an opportunity to get a nice little bit of momentum moving through the tournament.
Yeah, I'd be worried with them, to be honest. I think that that semi-final defeat to South Africa they actually ironically finished the World Cup probably feeling a bit better about themselves than France and Ireland. Borthwick got the job late. It was literally just get to this World Cup, get the best possible result out of it. Players are taking more ownership. You know, even around contracts, they've got rid of the player agency. It's Jamie George, Alice Kenge, etc., who are negotiating on their behalf. They're talking about improving the Twickenham experience, being more open, kind of copying a little bit what Farrell, the culture he created, and have some decent talent, and the Premiership's got better. So yeah, I'd be very respectful of England this year.
Yeah, so that's they're playing Italy first up this weekend on Saturday. Wales against Scotland will be the live game on RT2 and RT Player on Saturday afternoon. That kicks off 4:45. France and Ireland is on RT Radio 1, 8 p.m. Irish time kickoff for that live commentary. Final calls then, guys. Who wins between, first of all, France and Ireland? Johnny, I'll give you the honour.
France.
Birch?
France.
And who wins the Six Nations?
France.
France all the way. Okay, well, fingers crossed you're wrong. And hopefully we'll get to talk about that next week. Bernard and Johnny, thanks a million for joining us. And we'll be back with the RT podcast this time next week.